Today we're going to be doing another step on the old WJ. This time we're going to be installing some chassis stiffening plates. There's a few companies out there that offer them. In my case, I went with DB Metalworks. Not really, honestly, for any other reason than they seem to be the quickest availability and the price was pretty fair. I ordered these on eBay, as I did try to reach them on their phone number several times and nobody answered. Went ahead and did the eBay thing, received them in 5 days, so that's pretty impressive. When we talk about chassis stiffening plates, this is what we've got going on here. There's several plates. These ones here are going to go on the side of the frame rails and the rear, or in between the front and the rear. These ones here go on the bottoms and the other sides of the frame rails, if you want to call them that. Even though the WJ is a unibody vehicle, it does have some sheet metal frame rails that connect the front and back together. It does not have any kind of removable subframes like some vehicles. It all bolts up to the chassis. We've got these plates here, and then we've got these little angle brackets that are going to go in the rear, and they're going to go right above the spring pockets, or the spring perches in the rear, and those help stiffen things up there. I don't know if that's a known problem, but they're going to get installed. I've got a lot of things to take apart on here. In my case, we're going to start out with the front. We have these plates right here. These follow along and go on the sides of the front frame rails in the wheel well. We'll walk right over here and show you what we're talking about. Those plates are going to go right on here. This is all going to get ground down, and then those plates get welded on. We're going to have some things we got to take apart. Looks like we got to disconnect the gearbox. I've got to take the inner fender liner out. And looks like the washer solvent reservoir is going to have to get removed for this as well. No big deal. Now on the washer solvent thing, it's pretty common that a lot of people like to remove that and they shift it up to inside on the driver's fender using a reservoir out of an XJ, something along those lines. I haven't really had a problem with it. Now this has got 6.5 inches of lift. I run with 35s, drive it off-road often, and I've never had anything come around it. Now one thing I've noticed is that it seems to be common that a lot of people remove these inner fender liners. Myself, when I trimmed the front bumper cover to clear the tires originally, I just trimmed this thing down a little bit down on the bottom, and then I was able to zip tie it forward on the lower radiator support and up here on the inner frame structure, and I've driven it that way for a couple years and never had any problems. I prefer that because I'd rather not have my tires throwing a bunch of mud and crap all over my reservoir or up inside the wheel wells and thus into the engine compartment. So I've elected to not remove that. Now for this job, we're going to be removing it so we can get access in here, so we can get to the steering gear bolts. They're right here. There's 2 of them. Alright, so here we go. We're going to have to use a couple picks. Chrysler likes to use these safety locks on a lot of their connectors. These little red slides here that you got to slide before you can even try to disconnect the plug. I'm sure that this one's been plugged in since 2002, so it's not one that doesn't want to come off. I will tell you, a technician who has to unplug a lot of connectors and vehicles, lots of times you get a lot of luck if you push it in, then release the tab, then slide it off. As you see here, that worked out pretty well. I'm a little nervous about disconnecting these lines because I'm worried about creating a flood. So what I'm going to do first here is take the couple 10s out and drop it down a little bit and have it ready to go before it starts peeing all over the place on it here. See that those are loose. Looks like we got this slide right here where it's going to slide in here. You do see this piece here. This is part of the reservoir. I'm assuming that this is just going to slide backwards as we yank this out. So let's find out what happens. Yep, there we go. So that's pretty simple and straightforward. Like I said, we got a lot of hoses to deal with here. I've had lots of puddles of washer solvent in the past. It looks like this is going to be another one of those situations. Get this out of the way so you guys can see. And sure enough, it's going to piss all over. All right, well, I had to use 2 hands and do this off camera, but the reservoir is off. I found no matter what I did, it was going to pee all over the place. So popped the hoses off, flipped it over, dropped it into a drain pan, and that magical mix there. And we'll get another gallon of washer solvent later down the road. In my world, I intend to reinstall this right back where it goes. I'll explore some other options before the old girl goes back together. But as of right now, I don't see any reason to screw around with what we've got already. So the next thing we're gonna have to do here is we've got 4 18 millimeters. Those are holding the gearbox to the side of the frame. We're gonna remove those bolts, and then we're gonna see how this plate's gonna go on here. One thing I do notice, which we'll talk about again in a moment, is there is a curve and a bend here that is not replicated on the side plates. So not sure if we're going to have to bend them. I mean, one way or another we're going to have to. I might have to get some different like body vice grips to hold it all together, pinch it and conform it into place. Not sure yet. We got a little bit to do before we're to that point. So I'm going to grab my impact. We're going to zip these bolts off, and we're going to see what we're working with. So it's just the 4. They thread into the gearbox. Pulling them out's not that big of a deal. Well, maybe I should have thought about that a little bit better before I just let it flop, but it's flopped. Something else, if any of you are watching this have any experience with some different gearboxes, those are some options I would like to explore. I know a lot of talk about red tops and blue tops. I don't know the difference. They don't look like they're astronomically expensive, but if you guys can leave me some comments and tell me what your experiences are, what the difference is between the reds and the blues, and why I may or may not want one or the other, that one of those might end up on here before we get her all back together. All right, so as you see, I've got the plate clamped in place temporarily here. Main thing I'm doing at this moment is just trying to see what little spots might need to be trimmed. We have this little corner up here that's I've marked with a Sharpie. Got to trim that down a little bit. You see that the holes for the gearbox are pretty well lined up. It's kind of the angle of the camera a little bit. It makes them look crooked. There's still a gap there. I'm going to have to clamp it down a little bit tighter. Very obviously with this plate, like I mentioned before, it's a flat piece of steel. So there's going to be some tight clamping to get her down into place. I hope that some of the heating when we weld it in will help conform it to the body so it's not under tension. It seems to flex pretty well when I put the clamps on there. I just had to go and buy $65 in clamps just to hold it in place, but those are something I'll be using. Obviously I've got a lot more clamping and grinding and welding to do with this part of the process. There's a little panel right here that we're gonna have to trim. It's really hard to see with the camera, but that part sticks out a little bit, so I'm either going to trim that right off or put a slit right in the vertical line there and then bend that back just so I have that much more to weld to the vehicle. And then the biggest one that's interrupting anything fitting better is right here in this corner. And again, as you see, I marked that with the Sharpie. We're going to have to pull this off, grind that. One thing that we've got to line up, it's not really going to matter on mine, but tells me that we're not lined up properly, as these holes aren't where they're supposed to be. So we got to get this corner trimmed up here, try to move that up into place. It's been pretty lucky, even being clamped in. I can just tap it upwards with a hammer and it seems to slide right up to where we need it. So I think this is going to work out pretty good. Definitely going to add some strength. So I'm going to pop that off, trim to fit, and then we'll stick it back on there and see how this works out. Alright, so here it is mocked up. This is after doing all kinds of trimming. We start out with showing you guys here the hole for the upper control arm bolt. It gets pretty darn close, but not perfect. That is something that I am going to want to close up, because that's just a wide open space inside there where it's just going to trap dirt, mud, and hold crap in there, and we don't want that. So ultimately I may have to use a die grinder, hole saw, I'm not sure, and cut this lip off so I can put the plug in there. It'd be pretty easy. I could get just a piece of metal, weld it over there, close it up that way. I haven't decided, but I do want it closed up. I want as little crap as possible to get in there. Now, as far as everything fitting together, here's one thing that fits pretty perfectly. There is a hump that sticks out of the body right here. I'm not really sure what's on the other side there. Haven't bothered to look, but that fits pretty close and square to this hole here that surrounds the hump. I'm not sure how well you can see that with the camera. You can see it a little bit there. So that lines up pretty good. My number one concern, of course, is over here, and that's when we start talking about the gearbox bolts. Those are the holes that I just explained that I had to enlarge. If I pulled the control arm bolt hole closer, it pulls this further back towards the rear of the vehicle, and then the bolt holes don't line up at all in any way. As far as getting all the bend, or getting the bend into the plate, it does seem to be conforming and holding some memory as I put it on, clamped it on, taking it back off. It's holding its shape pretty well. And as far as welding, we're definitely going to start up here in the front, make sure everything's true and perfect around the bolt holes here, and then we'll start moving it backwards. The more I clamp it, the closer it gets to the body, and you know, the more things fit together. I just have a feeling once we start welding this, things are not gonna fit up quite perfectly. There's another spot here that's a recess right here. There's quite a big gap right there. I'm not sure the best way to hold that in. We're gonna clamp it all in together. Probably once we start getting everything all welded up along here and everything's all nice and tight, then we're gonna start trying to bend and conform this in here. I haven't decided if I need to use some heat or just the pressure of the clamps will do the trick. So far that's been working, because again, every time I've taken it off, it's been holding its shape pretty well. We got back here behind the spring pockets, same type of situation. That's got quite a bit of a gap. In fact, you see I can even stick my finger back behind there. So again, that's just gonna be one of those deals where we're gonna start in the front here. I don't think it has to fit exactly perfectly. I want it as perfect as possible. Ultimately, once it's on here, it's gonna be sealed up, and I'm probably gonna use some kind of, you know, rubberized undercoating or some kind of bed liner material or whatnot inside here. You're really not going to see all that. The whole main idea is just adding some strength to the structure. Everything else, you know, I'm not too disappointed with. Back here in the corner, I did have to grind the body to get in there, and I had to grind the plate, as I just showed you a little while ago, to get that to conform. That fits pretty good. Up here, I decided not to go with doing a slot and bending it and all that. Looks like I ground it a little bit crooked, but that's pretty much where that's going to live. I wanted to attach this and make it pretty much a solid permanent part of the vehicle as much as possible. I don't want a bunch of gaps. I don't want anything hanging out there, but by the time we get all this undercoating and paint off that I put on previously so we can weld this, I think everything's all going to fit pretty tight together. The other side, once we get to doing the passenger side, there are bolt holes on the other side as well. They do make these in right-hand drive in other countries, or did make them right-hand drive. It's not going to be as crucial over there, of course, because I don't have a gearbox over there and never will. So I'm not quite as worried about that, but I do want all the holes and everything to line up as good as possible. So at this point here, I'm going to do some marking with a Sharpie, see what spots I really need to remove some material so we can get down to bare metal. and then probably do some spot welds and start sticking it in place. So let's get at it. We're working on putting on the chassis stiffener still. We've gotten as far as getting the front wheel well plates in. This is the one I'll show you. I mentioned in my first episode that I'm not a fabricator, and obviously I'm not a welder either. Now, this bad boy's not going to go anywhere. It's going to be a little cleaning up and touching up on some of these welds, but either way, you figure it out as you go along, I suppose. A lot of the rest of the welding, I'm probably going to have my buddy that's a little bit more experienced come here and finish up some of the welding, but in the meantime, we're getting everything prepped. You see we got this in here pretty damn good. One piece of advice I'm going to give you all, same advice I was given, is when you start welding up in here down where the footwell is in the front seats, which you're going to be through the back side of the fender area here, the wheel well, real easy to start fires. I've had this problem on both sides. I moved the carpet back, and let me tell you, it's not just carpet that burns, but we've also got a seam sealer that likes to take off. So, not sure if you can see what we got going on here, but we had a little bit of a fire take place in here, and thank God that I kept looking and double checking. Some of the best advice I'm going to give you all here is have somebody with you. Have a fire extinguisher handy, and have somebody check it and check it and check it. If there's some reason that you can't do this, but you don't have any helper or anything like that, and have that door open and check every minute or so, because it doesn't take long. We ended up getting into the dash here. It went quickly. Pardon the mess that I have everywhere here, but fire got up here into the dash, into the HVAC box, melted a lot of stuff, and this is something that took place in minutes. If I wouldn't have checked, used my a little more common sense than I usually do, I wouldn't have checked that. That would have burned the Jeep down, and it would have burned my barn down. And, well, I wouldn't be here talking to you guys. So, basically, be safe, double check, be really damn careful, and again, keep in mind that seam sealer goes up like pretty much like a solid napalm, or